24 years ago, I worked on a film that was set in Charleston, South Carolina, taking place in the 1940s. Taking place, I'll start again. I make costumes for film and television. 24 years ago, I worked on a film that was set in Charleston, South Carolina in the 1940s. It's a film that most of you have probably seen. My job title on this project was Cutter Draper. That means that I took the measurements of the actors, the drawing or concept of the costume designer, created a pattern, cut the fabric for the costume, and oversaw the sewing of the costumes. Then I fit the costumes on the actors to be ready for set. The director of this film was the son of a very famous deceased Hollywood spaghetti western director and a very famous actress who was cast as one of the main characters in the film that this story is about. To say the least, this director behaved like a man-child, which constantly put him at odds with the costume designer, who behaved like a well-qualified grown-up. I'm sure all the women in here can relate to this. To say the least, this director constantly was at odds with the costume designer. One day, the costume designer came into the workroom to tell me that we would be constructing a dress for an actress who was cast to play the main character's best friend. The designer's eyes rolled when she told me that the director's girlfriend was cast to play that small role and would be in the next day to be measured for the costume. Remember, the designer and the director did not see eye to eye. I asked what this actress looked like so I could be on the lookout for her. The answer to that was Hollywood whore. Now, I really respected and liked this designer, so imagine how shocked I was by this. I told her that I don't call anyone that and didn't understand why she would either, to which she replied, "Just wait and see." The next day, Heather, the actress, entered our room. I knew who she was immediately. I'll start with the shoes. They were baby pink patent leather stilettos with 6-inch heels, jeans that looked like they could have only been painted on, a waist-length pink puffy curly alpaca baseball style jacket, a tank top with extra firm and abundant cleavage spilling over the neckline, sunglasses with frames the size of dinner plates, and hoop earrings that were so large that you could stick your arm through them. Do you remember back in the 90s when hair was big, long, permed, and gelled for that perfect wet look? Well, she had that. Oh, did I mention she was carrying a whippet named Lamp? Yes, Lamp. Ask me about that later. Heather was lovely to chat with while I took her measurements, and then she went on her way. The fabric that was selected for Heather's garden party dress, this was a garden party scene that was going to happen, was a beautiful ivory cotton chintz with big spaced out pink cabbage roses all over it. The dress we created and constructed for her was a 1940s halter dress with an A-line skirt and triple line for opacity. I knew there would be a sunrise in the scene, and I didn't want anybody seeing through that dress, so it was triple lined. Got to the fabric. She and Lamp came in for her fitting the next day. Yes, we made that dress in an afternoon. The dress was gorgeous on her, especially on her gigantic self-supporting boobs, and it fit her perfectly. All I had to do was mark where the hem was to be, and then she said to me, "I have decided this character hates flowers, and her mother bought this dress for her with flowers all over it and is making her wear this to this garden party. And I want you to cut off all the flowers." So, to say the least, I was stunned. And I said, "You're kidding, right?" And she said, "Nope, do it." And she was strangely calm about that. And I said, "To be clear, you want me to take my scissors and cut all the roses off this beautiful dress?" And she said, yes. And Lamp just sat there. I said, excuse me for a few minutes, please. So I rushed out the door and into the costume designer's office, and I said, come with me now. And she said, I'm busy. And I said, no, you have to come with me. And then I rushed into the workroom and told my tailors also to come with me. So with all of us and the costume designer now in this big fitting room where I left Heather, I said to the costume designer, Heather has decided that her character hates flowers and wants me to cut all the roses off this dress. My tailors were standing by the wall going, like terrified. We had just made this beautiful dress for her. And the designer walked up to me, looked me straight in the eye and said, do it. And remember, she and the director, whose girlfriend this was, did not get along. They butted heads all along. Ask me about that later, too. I'm told that the next morning when Heather was dressed in this dress that I cut holes all in, and remember it was triple lined too, so it's not like there was a tit hanging out or anything. But so I had that covered at least. Anyway, I'm told that the next morning when Heather was dressed, made up, and ready for the garden party scene, she ran up to her director, Boy Toy, and told him about how she decided that her character despised the dress her mother bought her, so she cut it up. He was not amused. He was so not amused that he made sure the camera only shot her from here up, and that she was no longer featured in that scene. As you may have guessed, he was furious that the costume designer had allowed this dress to be mutilated. I'm told that she calmly smiled as he yelled in her face about this, and I admired her for not throwing me under the bus, the cutter of the dress. I hacked that dress apart. And I admired her quick thinking, her passive-aggressive action about just saying, do it. And she gave him enough rope to hang himself. It was like the best, most subtle fuck you of all time. 2 weeks later, that designer quit or was fired, who knows, but she left with extreme satisfaction. So, questions? Anyone?
Why was the dog named Lamp?
The dog was okay, so in the conversation that I had with Heather while I was measuring her for the dress, you know what, everybody know what a whippet is? Okay, yeah, so a miniature greyhound with like zero personality. I'm sure they have personality, but like she could set this dog in one place and it stayed in whatever position it landed on there. And so anyway, she told me that she and the director were in bed one day and they were deciding what they were going to name their future children. And like, we could name our kid Lamp, or we could name them Chair, or Ceiling Fan, or whatever. So that is how the dog became the Lamp. So anyway, other questions?
You're not going to tell us the names.
Well, funny you should ask that, Mary Lovelace. So you can look up my IMDb page and probably figure out from the fact that I told you it's a 1940s movie. For every film or television project I work on, I sign an NDA, and when we get a script printout, when we receive a script printout, either via email or a hard copy script, our names are printed diagonally, lightly along the back of it, so that if suddenly this gets out, they know whose gizzard to choke because something got out. And even though that movie was filmed probably 22, 24 years ago, it is a movie that all of you have seen, I am quite certain, and it you know, in the day and age of social media, I do not wish to be quoted admitting exactly what it was. But again, check my IMDb page, Kat Ferris, and you all are clearly intelligent people who will figure this out. Other questions?
Why didn't the costume designer and director, you said
What, why didn't they get along? Okay, so this will help you figure it out too. There was a young version of the main character and an old version of the main character. In fact, the old version of the main character, the whole story was how she fell into Alzheimer's and all that. The young version of that main character was at the beginning of her career. She is very famous now. You will know who she is. And every 1940s style dress that we constructed for her, or play suit, we did these onesie play suits for her to bike in and horseback ride and all that. She wanted them tighter than what was truly period. And so whenever we had a fitting with her, the costume designer and I would say, this is how it's supposed to fit for the 1940s. And she would, being a young thing back then, just, smile and nod, and then go straight to the director and say, they're not doing what I want. And of course, he was a man-child, remember that part? And he would instantly go to the costume designer and say, just do what she wants. So there was that. Any other questions?
We all figured it out by now. I see y'all on your phone.
What were the guesses? Huh? I knew you all were smart. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yes. I believe that you smart people have probably figured this out. So. Another thing about that movie that you might remember, if you see a DVD of said movie, there is a scene where she's wearing a blue dress, right? Blue dress, rain scene, it's raining on them and everything. Just fun fact from my world, whenever we make something that we know is going to be an iconic costume that goes down in history as the cover for that particular movie, we make more than one. So because, actors are privileged people and behave as so sometimes, so no matter how many times I tell them at lunch, do not eat in that costume. Don't, they often do. So we have multiples for ridiculous things. But also, that was a rain scene, and it wasn't really raining. It was really about 6 o'clock in the morning. It was in Charleston, outside, in a plantation outside of Charleston, South Carolina. It was about 38 degrees that day. And the production had decided that since they had to be wet, they would set this hot tub just off camera so that both of them could get out of their costume and jump into that hot tub to warm up, and then put on a dry version of that. The whole thing took about 8 different scenes, but we made 4 dresses, and we had to construct a mechanism for drying those dresses out in this canal on this plantation. And so we took this Rubbermaid trash can and had the carpentry guys drill holes, big holes in the side of it, and we put hair dryers in it. So as she took off the first wet dress, we would hang it from a hanger from the lid, close it up, and it would dry that dress. We'd put her in the second one. She and Dude would go do the scene all over again, and then we'd take that one and, cycled them through. So anyway, any other questions? Pardon? I don't know. I don't really care either. Yes, Laura?
If we ask questions about everything you told us we can ask you about later, have we missed anything?
You have probably missed a lot, and yes. Yes. So any other questions? Thank you all.